Welcome to Spicer and Company. I'm Sean Spicer.
And I'm Lindsay Keith. Over the weekend, riots raged from coast to coast. And here in D.C., dozens of Secret Service agents were injured as violence spread all the way to the White House.
Yeah, you know, this is not the show that I thought we would be doing on Monday when we walked out of here on Friday with you guys. Walking around D.C. this morning is like nothing I have seen in almost 30 years of living in this area. The destruction of property and the graffiti was unbelievable. This all stemmed from peaceful protests over the killing of George Floyd. It has now become riots from one side of the country to another. Some of this has now been blamed on Antifa, which is an organization that calls itself anti-fascist. But more and more critics are now taking interest in the fact that these guys are causing the violent unrest than facilitating any type of real solution.
Yeah, and law enforcement officials were the focus of the unrest, but the violence quickly spun out of control, like you mentioned, John. And you were out on the streets to survey the damage earlier today. I want to share that footage with our viewers.
All right, so we're here on H Street. Right on the corner of the street is Lafayette Park. We are a block and a half from the White House. This is the White House Historical Society and gift shop. You can see by the corner, this is how close people were, spreading graffiti all over the walls. If you look across the street, these are some of the local restaurants here on H Street, all boarded up. You can hear the power washers all up and down the block trying to get this graffiti off that was put on overnight. They continue to put up boards in all the restaurants, the windows. Right across the street from us here is St. John's, the church that was burned last night. Local hotels boarded up. Everywhere you look, it's graffiti, graffiti, graffiti. The sound of power washers is up and down this whole corridor of the city. And, you know, you got to wonder what's going to happen tonight.
Well, Sean, that's just the question that most people are wondering. You know, the violence happened late at night over the weekend, and like you asked, will it happen again?
Yeah, I mean, whether you're looking at L.A., New York, D.C., everyone is starting to figure out, you know, what this all means, how long it's going to continue, and frankly, bracing for it. What may be to come. We showed you that scene from this morning, but I want to show you some of the other images that have been captured overnight. This is Lafayette Park. This is just steps from where I was, which is right in front of the White House and where the protests last night turned violent. As you can see, that's a public bathroom that's located in the park, and it was vandalized with all sorts of foul language and epithets against the president. And then protests later set fire to the building as people also burned police barricades. And this scene is also in the nation's capital. Fire trucks rushed to put out fires as cars were literally set on fire and businesses in the area were looted and graffiti was on many of the surrounding buildings and the monuments. Right, just, I mean, literally steps from the White House. And while the mayor, Muriel Bowser, admonished all of this violent protesting, she did a disservice to the city, I think, when she instituted a curfew, but waited to institute it till 11 o'clock. She's already instituted one tonight that will start at 8 o'clock. We'll see how that helps. Joining us now, though, to talk about all of this is the former vice mayor of Alexandria, Virginia, which is right over the Potomac River, a 30-year veteran of the Capitol Police Office, and a individual who's working with at-risk youth, Bill Cleveland, and the former Metropolitan Police Department's assistant chief and the executive director of the Washington, D.C. Police Foundation, Pat Burke. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Thank you, Sean.
Pat, let me start with you. You know, when these things have happened in the past, they've normally been reaction to a perceived lack of justice. Someone gets let off in a case of police brutality, and then there's protest. This time, the officer in question was arrested rather quickly, and yet now the riots are growing. And the question is, how do we quell this? Because it continues to seem like it's getting, you know, more and more rather than less and less.
Well, first of all, Sean, in D.C., we've been dealing with protests every single day for years. We encourage people to come to the nation's capital to exercise their First Amendment rights, but that includes peacefully exercising their right to free speech and freedom of assembly. I think the challenge here now is keeping that balance. We want people to be able to congregate to peaceably assemble, but when people want to do violence, loot, riot, then police agencies, and there's numerous agencies in DC, need to step in, make arrests, and stop this violence from occurring. It's completely unacceptable.
Bill, you've seen this from every angle. You were an elected official, you're a 30-year veteran, and you work with a lot of these young at-risk children. So you kind of really have a unique perspective. I think the thing that's concerning to me is that we've lost focus on what started all this, which is the treatment of George Floyd and his killing. And now we've gotten into rioting and looting. What can be done to make sure that we get back to the message of how this all started?
The main thing I truly believe is mentoring, working with young people all the way through. I've worked with young people for 32 years now. It's called the Untouchables here in the city of Alexandria. Also working with the Southeast White House over in D.C., right off 2939 Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast. It's right across the bridge there. And working with young people is a thing that makes the difference. The other thing too is giving them a grounding to look for, a higher power. That's what we tell them. Now, my higher power, like I tell them, is Jesus Christ. But theirs might be another, but there's a higher power than themselves. And when they do that, then they will have a ground to work on. Now, a lot of these young people that are out here, especially that are working, they don't have that grounding in which to work on, and then they're led off by other things. And it's my idea for the young people or for the leaders in the city that want to do a march, because when we do it here in the city of Alexandria, we do it with the police department, and we do it at a time, and it's over with before there is any violence or anything like that.
So where do we stand right now in terms of what do we tell the police officers? They're trying to protect at the same time, but they don't want to escalate it. So where is that line? And secondly, does the mayor's curfew last night, was that too late?
Well, I am glad to see that after what occurred last night, that it has been moved up to, I understand, 7 p.m. tonight. But once again, the role for the police officers that are out there is to be patient and make sure that they're respecting the rights of peaceful First Amendment demonstrators. And we encourage them to be out there. But once again, when people are committing acts of violence, looting, then making sure that those people are aggressively arrested. And when I say aggressively, that I mean that we're not going to take any looting whatsoever, that they know that there are consequences for their actions. And it's a range of people that are engaging in these demonstrations and taking advantage of the demonstrations under the guise of peaceful protests, that take advantage of that opportunity to throw bricks from a crowd under the guise of anonymity, to loot a store when they couldn't care less about George Floyd's life. And I think that George Floyd's family, in an interview I saw with his brother Terrence, would consider these riots the antithesis of what George Floyd would have asked for.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate both of you guys, your insight. I agree with you, Bill. We've got to really start focusing on mentorship and figuring out how to bridge this divide so that it doesn't continue. I want to thank you both, gentlemen, for coming and sharing your perspective with us at this very difficult time.
Anytime, Sean.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Well, coming up, we're going to talk to Indiana's Congressman Jim Banks on how the protests are hitting the Midwest. Later in the show, we're going to kick off our special series, Blocked and Banned, Social Media Censorship of the Right. Today, Donald Trump Jr. talks about attempts to shadow ban him. You're not going to want to miss this.